Hey guys, quick aside before we start today's episode. Two things. One, in case you're not aware, I've released t-shirts with the logos of the various shows on them, and if you're interested in that, you can check them out at this link. The second thing I have to tell you is that this week's episode is sponsored by Loot Crate. Now, I'm not going to go into big detail about what Loot Crate is, because you probably already know what it is. All I'll tell you is that you can go to this link, and if you use the code BRIDGE10, lowercase, no space, you can get 10% off your subscription. So, if you've been on the fence about Loot Crate, and you want to get 10% off your first month, there you go. And in the event that you are on the fence and don't really know what to expect from Loot Crate, I have the most recent one here, because not only am I doing this sponsorship deal thing, I'm also a subscriber to Loot Crate, so this is last month's, and it came with a lot of cool stuff. You got a Rick and Morty t-shirt, which is really awesome and really comfortable. A pair of Harry Potter socks. I haven't worn these, but I have a pair of Star Trek socks just like them that I absolutely love. A Westworld figure statue collector thingy. I don't watch Westworld, but if I did, this would be cool. They always come with a pin. This is a Westworld pin. Again, don't watch it. And it came with an X-Files card game, and this is really cool, that the card game itself, once I get it out of the plastic, the case for the cards looks like an FBI, badge ID holder, and this one has two cards in it that are Mulder and Scully's bags. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the X-Files. I've only seen the first 2 episodes, but this is awesome. So, like I said, if you were on the fence about getting Loot Crate, you can go to this link and use the code BRIDGE10 to get 10% off your order. On to this week's video. Hello and welcome to How to Fix It. While the DC Extended Universe is still hit or miss, mostly miss, DC's television properties have been doing really well, specifically the properties on the CW Arrowverse. I happen to be a huge fan of most of the shows contained within it. Like I've said before, Legends of Tomorrow is my favorite, and while we looked at the second season of The Flash for a Patreon-sponsored review back in December, I want to take a look at the entire universe as a whole, and the first time that all 4 shows crossed over together. Sort of. Invasion was a DC Comics event from 1988, where a bunch of aliens, including the Thanagarians, Hawkman's people, and the Daxamites, a close cousin to Kryptonians, led by the evil Dominators, insert your own Doctor Who joke here, since I used up my allotted Doctor Who jokes for the month last week, mount an attack on Earth to wipe out all of the metahumans, since the Dominators perceive them as a threat. It's been adapted before by Young Justice, where the Dominators were replaced with the Reeks from Blue Beetle. The CW Invasion event is a more direct adaptation, retaining the Dominators, though also very different, not having any of the other alien species in it, despite name-dropping the Thanagarians in Legends of Tomorrow, and having Mon-El of Daxam being a main character on Supergirl. It was billed as a 4-night crossover event, with the entire special being spread throughout Supergirl, The Flash, Arrow, and Legends, with a bunch of the heroes from the 4 shows being brought together by Barry Allen and teaming up to save Earth from the wrath of the Dominators. On the surface, it sounds awesome, and it was good, but I also have a lot of problems with it, and it definitely could have been even better than it was. But I've got a lot of backstory to cover, so I think it's better to just get right into it. This is Invasion. So this is where my first problem arises. Normally I'd save it for later, but it's sort of intrinsically linked to the actual plot. It was billed as a 4-night crossover event, which just isn't true. It's a 3-night crossover, since the Supergirl episode for that week had absolutely nothing to do with the crossover, save for Barry and Cisco showing up at the end to ask for Kara's help, which is then recapped in the Flash episode, so you don't actually have to watch the Supergirl episode, and Supergirl herself is the only character who appears in the crossover. Not like it would have been useful to ask the Martian Manhunter for help or anything. Anyway, what you need to know about The Flash is that following Flashpoint, the timeline has been altered in subtle and not so subtle ways, and Cisco and Barry aren't on good terms since one of the alterations included Cisco's brother Dante dying in a car accident. A new evil speedster has shown up named Savitar, along with Team Flash gaining yet another new Harrison Wells from Earth-19. His name is HR, and he's basically Dan Dorian, and my favorite Wells yet. And Wally has finally gotten his powers, but Joe and Iris don't really want him to use them because of how dangerous being a hero is. Over on Arrow, which I do not watch, so I'm not entirely all up to speed on what happens in it, Oliver Queen is the Arrow. He has a team of heroes on his side now, including Mr. Terrific, Ragman, and Wild Dog, and he's also the mayor of Star City. Things that have happened recently included losing Laurel Lance, the Black Canary, to Damien Dark, so Oliver's just as dark and broody as ever. Legends of Tomorrow, well, their storyline is a little more complex, but let me explain. Rip Hunter, Time Master from the far future, after losing his wife and son to the evil Vandal Savage, recruited a team of inconsequential historical figures to attempt to destroy Savage before he takes over the world in 2152. Those figures include Sarah Lance, the White Canary, Martin Stein and Jax, who make up Firestorm, Leonard Snart and Mick Rory, aka Captain Cold and Heatwave, Hawkman and Hawkgirl, though they don't factor into this crossover since they left at the end of Season 1, and our good old great disaster-stopping pal, Ray Palmer. They defeated Savage, but at the cost of Snart's life, him having sacrificed himself for the team. At the start of the second season, their main villain is a past version of Damien Dark, who's working with the Reverse Flash to try to find the Spear of Destiny so they can rewrite reality. This is good news for Sarah because it means that she has a chance to kill Dark before he kills Laurel in the future. Additionally, Rip has gone missing and the team has 2 new members, Nate Haywood aka Steel, and Amaya Jiwe, Vixen, the grandmother of Mari McCabe because Mari's actress wasn't available to be a regular. Also, a few episodes earlier, Professor Stein, when trying to give his past self a piece of his mind for always choosing work over their wife, has been sieged by strange memories that he doesn't understand. In addition, he and Jax found a message hidden in a secret room on the Wave Rider, addressed to Rip from the Barry Allen in 2056, which warns of an upcoming war. I think that's pretty much it, and anything else I'll apprise you of later when it's relevant. The crossover event starts with a spaceship landing in Central City, releasing several alien creatures that rush out onto the Earth. The US government knows something about it and is trying to cover it up, keeping it away from Argus, which is run by Lila Diggle, aka Harbinger. You might remember her comics counterpart as being the woman that was working with the Monitor in Crisis on Infinite Earths. She tells Barry that the aliens, the Dominators, have shown up once before in the 1950s and abducted humans to study them before leaving. As for why they've suddenly returned, Lila doesn't know. She tells Barry that he can't handle it on his own and to stay out of it, but Barry has other plans. He gets all of his hero buddies together, including Team Arrow, though mainly just Oliver, Felicity, Oliver's sister Thea, and John Diggle, Supergirl, and the Legends, though Nate and Amaya stay back on the Wave Rider, and Sarah, Ray, Stein, Jax, and Mick arrive on the jump ship. Barry informs them of what they're up against, and they go off to train, leaving Stein and Jax to tell Barry about the message, which he shares with Oliver. The full message says that Barry can't be trusted because of his actions during Flashpoint, though it's later revealed at the end of the season that the message was specifically referring to an event in Barry's future and was actually unrelated to the Dominator stuff. Professor Stein also asks Caitlin to accompany him to his house where he intends to see his wife, but instead finds his daughter. A daughter that, if you watch The Flash, you know he doesn't have. Those memories are his memories being changed to line up with the aberration that he caused by his interference in his own past. He immediately leaves since he can't cope with that right now, and he also comforts Caitlin, since she's having trouble coping with her newfound cold powers. Wally is mad at Iris and Joe for not letting him train, and he tries to convince HR to train him, though HR is reluctant. However, Cisco finds the future message and forces Barry to reveal that he changed the timeline to the team, and everyone save for Oliver, Kara, Jack, Stein, and Felicity no longer wants to trust him because he altered their personal timelines, however inadvertently. Sarah is the most disappointed in him because she's had to deal with a similar desire to alter time to bring back Laurel. Though I'll get to this later, she acts all morally superior despite the fact that every time they face Damien Dark in the past, she tries to kill him, timeline be damned. Oliver hangs back with Barry as the rest of the team go to rescue the president, who has been kidnapped by the Dominators. Barry and Oliver have a heart-to-heart over Barry's changes to the timeline, and the heroes who went on the mission, pretty much everyone except Oliver and Barry, get mind-controlled and begin to attack Star Labs. Wally comes in to assist, but is hit and Oliver defends him, while Barry runs off to distract Supergirl and destroy the device that's mind-controlling them. They succeed, and everyone forgives Barry, but once the heroes are saved, the non-metahumans, though really just the current and former Arrow regulars, Oliver, Diggle, Sarah, Thea, and Ray, are abducted by the aliens. This leads into the Arrow portion of the crossover, which is where the 5 Arrow cast members are put into a shared hallucination. That's basically Oliver's It's a Wonderful Life scenario, where Oliver, Sarah, Ray, Thea, and Diggle see what their lives would be like if Oliver never went on the Queen's Gambit, which is what started him down the path of becoming the Arrow. Laurel is alive, and her and Oliver are getting married the following day. Thea's life is happy and hasn't been upended since both her and Oliver's parents are still alive, though as I later found out, Malcolm Merlin is her real father and is alive, but is a total bastard, who is eventually going to help Thawne and Dark on their quest for the spear. Ray and Felicity are also engaged to be married, and Diggle is the Green Arrow, for some reason. I don't watch Arrow, so maybe that makes sense based on his backstory, but I feel like it probably doesn't. Everyone starts noticing the glitches in the Matrix, but most of them ignore them for the sake of their seemingly idyllic lives. Except Oliver, who goes so far as to put himself in the line of fire when he's about to be mugged out of habit and then uses his memory to lead himself to the Arrow Cave, where Diggle confronts him and tells him to go home to his perfect life. In the real world, Cisco and Felicity try to triangulate Oliver and company's location, though not the Disney movie with Billy Joel, with the help of the recruits. And we learn that Wild Dog hates metahumans for some reason. Was that a thing on Arrow, or is that just for the crossover? Because it feels like a new thing for him, but I don't know. They need a special device to do it, which was stolen by a cyborg lady, and so Barry and Kara help track her down and get the device back, while showing Wild Dog that metahumans aren't so bad. In the simulation, everyone realizes what's going on and needs to leave, despite how hard it is, except Thea, who doesn't want to go home because the simulation is so idyllic, and tells Oliver that maybe it's their reward for all the good they've done. Eventually she relents and they fight their way out through representations of their tragic past. Thea kills her father, Sarah gets to kill Damien Dark, Ray gets to kill one of Deathstroke's minions who killed his fiancée, Diggle fights a hive mind agent, and Oliver kills Slade Wilson. They exit the simulation and discover that their minds were being probed and that they were chosen to be abducted, specifically because none of them are metahumans and so couldn't fight back. They escape, stealing an escape pod, and are rescued by Nate and Amaya on the Wave Rider, where Gideon translates something they heard one of the Dominators say when they escaped, that the weapon is nearing completion. The Legends episode begins with the team learning that the Dominators have a metahuman bomb that will destroy all the metahumans and kill a bunch of humans. So Mick, Nate, Amaya, Cisco, and Felicity go back in time to find a Dominator in the past so they can figure out a weakness in the future. Oliver also sidelines Kara because I don't know. Honestly, it makes no sense, and he gives an explanation that when something is weird and uncomfortable, he pushes back, but she's already proven herself twice over in the last 2 episodes, so it feels like injecting tension for the sake of tension instead of narrative reasons. Professor Stein and Caitlin begin working on a potential way to stop the Dominators, and in the effort of working with nanotechnology, Caitlin calls in Lily. And I remind you, it's actually really brilliant, because if you factor in that she's always been there, Caitlin must be extremely close with her, considering when Ronnie was part of Firestorm. Stein is still uncomfortable around her and confides in Caitlin about Lily being an aberration, but Caitlin tells him that aberration or no aberration, she's his daughter and he has to treat her like so. Cisco and Felicity are left aboard the Wave Rider while Nate, Amaya, and Mick go to kidnap a Dominator, but get ambushed by Men in Black government agents, including the younger counterpart of an agent that we'd seen threaten Lila a few episodes earlier. Felicity talks with Cisco about his issues with Barry, and when they see the Legends get captured, they leap into action and rescue them and the Dominator, fixing his ship and taking a communications device so they can use it to communicate with the Dominators in the future. The shady Men in Black guy, Agent Smith, confronts Barry and tells him that Flashpoint got the Dominator's attention, and they want to either get rid of all the metahumans or they want Barry Allen handed over to them, something that Barry, of course, considers because he's Barry Allen and always wants to sacrifice himself. Seriously, I think it happens at least once a season on The Flash. Cisco calls up their Dominator buddy, and he tells them that the Dominators will spare the 5 of them for their actions back in the 50s, but if Barry isn't turned in, all the metahumans will be destroyed. Cisco vibes up to the Dominator ship to try to negotiate, but the Dominator tells him that all metahumans are a threat that they've seen destroy countless worlds, and it has to end. And they found out of the existence of metahumans thanks to Cisco's intervention in the past. So it makes Cisco see that Barry messing with the timeline was bad and that he should be forgiven. Even though, comparatively, what Cisco did wasn't entirely the same as what Barry did. Barry tries to sacrifice himself, but all of his friends and allies tell him not to. Stein's arc with Lily ends when he finally sees her for the first time as his daughter at Caitlin's behest, and they create nano-weapons that can attach themselves to the Dominators and cause immeasurable agony. So they basically invented the Agonizer from Star Trek. Considering that we get a Darmok and Jalad joke when they went through time, I'm surprised that Cisco or Nate didn't point that out. And then we get the big team-up minus Wally and Thea because they just vanished after their episodes ended, and minus Sarah because she's busy with Cisco on the Wave Rider trying to stop the Metabomb. They get Firestorm to transmute the bomb into water, and Barry and Supergirl attach the Agonizers to all of the Dominators attacking the planet, leaving the heroes victorious and the Dominators fleeing with their metaphorical tails between their legs. The new president rewards the team, Supergirl convinces the president to reassign Smith to Antarctica, Oliver apologizes to Kara for being a dick earlier, we get some fun in-jokes as Ray remarks that Kara looks like his cousin, alluding to Routh's earlier role in the DCU as Superman. Jax agrees to keep Lily a secret from the rest of the team because Stein doesn't want to revert the aberration. Cisco gives Kara a little device to allow her to go to and from Earth-1 if she ever needs their help, and everyone goes their separate ways. Diggle even forgives Barry for erasing his daughter, and the special ends with Barry and Oliver getting a drink in the bar and toasting to their strange lives. First things first, I think using the invasion event was a good idea, because it's one that not many people know about. I had certainly never heard of it, and so it hasn't really been done to death in the same way that other events have. And more importantly, it's one that doesn't require them to have the giant world-spanning Justice League in place. I mean, an Arrowverse version of Blackest Night would be cool, but they don't have a Green Lantern Corps yet, and without all the death of major characters over the years that the DC Comics universe have, it would fall flat. And considering the wealth of metahumans on The Flash, it made sense that if the Dominators were going to notice it, they would have probably noticed it 3 years into the mess. And I think that as a framing narrative to get everyone together, being called together to fight against aliens is a pretty solid justification. It's not contrived that Barry would pull together his closest allies, and it's especially good at justifying breaching the barrier of dimensions to get Supergirl. Plus, considering how intense at least the 3 shows that I watched, Supergirl, Flash, and Legends, were at the time in their main story, the crossover was a nice reprieve for a few episodes to decompress and get to have a little fun. Speaking of fun, the comedy was funny, specifically in Legends, the most lighthearted of the shows, especially the stuff we got with Mick and the after effects of time travel, that we don't get to see all that often because they usually keep a pretty standardized team nowadays, so we get maybe one of those per season if we're lucky. Plus, I'm a sucker for a Next Generation reference, so right there the episode endeared itself to me. And like usual, Blake Neely's score was fantastic. And the Dominators also look pretty good. I mean, not fantastic, but I actually believe that they're there. And I think that the general story is good, and it works for tying into the Flash's running arc, and tying together everyone else's into the Dominator premise. Finally, Professor Stein's arc was very well done, and is by far the most developed arc that anyone has in this crossover. Just the stuff with him and Caitlin, which you sort of forget that him and Caitlin have a connection because of Ronnie, and then how he finally accepts Lily, but knows that the team will want to revert the timeline, and so has to keep it a secret. And just that line when Jax was trying to transmute the bomb.
Can't do it! You must, Jefferson. I have a daughter. Her name is Lily, and she's counting on you. She's counting on both of us.
It is so utterly beautiful, and I remind you that I had no clue who Firestorm was in the context of the Arrowverse when I watched it for the first time, and it still hit me the same way it did when I watched it while binge-watching Legends. Professor Stein really is the MVP of the crossover, and it really comes down to Victor Garber being a brilliant actor. In fact, all of the actors in this are really good. Everyone on these shows is usually really great, but in this, a lot of them get a chance to do something different since they're interacting with characters that they normally don't. Cisco and Felicity geeking out in the Wave Rider while Nate, the resident nerd, tries to keep them on task, mix various conversations with Kara. We get a lot of good character interaction, and the fight scenes in this are really good. We get to see a great combination of all of the alien fighting, the meta fighting, the physical human martial arts fighting. It's great, and none of the fight scenes feel forced or rushed or anything. All of the fight scenes are awesome. The crossover, for the most part, is really good, but there are a fair share of missteps that it makes that hampers the quality. The most glaring issue is that it's not actually a 4-part crossover. That might seem small, but it also means that it feels a lot more rushed than it should have been. That extra 40 minutes or so might have actually alleviated a few of the issues I have. And something minor that's part of that is that they had an opportunity to bring together some of the members of past versions of the Justice League, especially the Justice League Detroit team, since they had Steel, Vixen, Firestorm, Martian Manhunter, and Vibe. So the fact that Kara is the only Supergirl character to appear was a huge letdown. And yeah, Steel, Vixen, and Firestorm fight together on a weekly basis, all being legends, but they didn't even try to complete the team. Though this is a minor thing, it just bugs me because with all of the callbacks to the Hall of Justice and the Justice League that they tossed in, that one seemed like a no-brainer. And you can't even argue that they were saving it for Crisis on Earth X because they managed to not actually have John Jones, Elongated Man, and Cynthia be included, despite them having appeared only a few episodes earlier on their respective shows. And then proceeded to make it so that one of the characters on the team can never appear again, so it'll probably never happen. I feel like we got a little off message. Additionally, characters just show up and vanish. We lose Iris, Joe, Wally, and HR after the Flash episode, despite the fact that the 4 of them should have been there to talk Barry out of sacrificing himself. Arrow's recruits only show up during Arrow and go MIA during the big fight at the end. We don't see Nate or Amaya until the 4th episode. Technically, we see Nate at the end of the 3rd, but it's the last 5 minutes, so it's basically episode 4. I know having that many characters is hard to keep track of for the writers, but if you can't handle that many characters, don't do a giant crossover event unless you're actually going to use everyone. That 4th episode might have made it so that they could develop those characters a bit more. In keeping with that, it doesn't feel like an event. It feels like 3 distinct parts of a story and not one giant running story. Like Crisis on Earth X, that felt continuous. It kept its momentum between all 4 parts. This one, it goes in spurts. We get the story starting on The Flash, and for the entire first episode it's fine. Then the Arrow episode starts, and we're sidetracked from the aliens to track down the cyborg lady. And yes, I know what the nickname Cisco and Ragman gave her is, but it's technically a Doctor Who reference, and if I try to use more than my allotted Doctor Who jokes for February, I'll get a small electric shock. Watch. Her nickname was Cyberwoman. See? Anyway, following that, we do the Legends thing that brings us right back to the Dominators plot. But as a result, we just spent an entire episode sidetracked with Oliver's team and barely focus on the crossover as a whole. And there's an explanation for that. The Arrow episode that bridges The Flash and Legends of Tomorrow was Arrow's 100th episode, so it was 1/3 of a major crossover, and a milestone episode, so it had to do the whole Arrow callback stuff, hence why the only characters who get abducted by the Dominators are ones who got their start on Arrow. Oliver, obviously, Thea, Ray, Sarah, and Diggle. So while Ray and Sarah are technically legends, they started out in Star City, and with the focus on Wild Dog's anti-meta prejudice, we lose the steam of the Dominators since we're fixated on Arrow problems. Not to mention that aside from Barry, Kara, Ray, Sarah, and Cisco, plus Nate and Amaya right at the very end, no one from the crossover shows up at all in that episode. Meanwhile, all the other shows focus on everyone fighting the Dominators. Sure, we have that focus on Wally in the Flash episode, but Wally is part of the action with everyone else, trying to get in on the alien butt-kicking. And in Legends, they go back in time and focus on Nate, Mick, and Amaya, but they bring Cisco and Felicity, and they work through Cisco's problems, as well as having the big battle resolution. When I watched the crossover for the first time, I was only following Supergirl at that time. I've since gotten into The Flash and Legends, and I had a basic knowledge of The Flash because I had seen the first episode back when it premiered, and Legends actually made itself pretty easy to understand without having knowledge of it. Their part of the crossover didn't really require knowledge of the show's various arcs, except Stein's, and it was so well developed on its own that I was able to figure it out easily. But the Arrow episode was hard to sit through, because in order to understand the episode, you have to know the history of the show and care about the characters. Sure, I get Sarah's thing with Laurel, but I don't get why Ray is all happy. Yeah, he has a fiancé again, but Ray loves being the Atom. We just had an entire mini-arc of him coming to terms with not being the Atom, so it feels forced that he was there, likely only because he was an Arrow alum. And Ray doesn't even do anything inside the simulation apart from recognizing Sarah. Despite everyone else, we actually get to see their normal lives. We could have gotten Ray getting to do some Science Bro style stuff with Cisco or Stein and Caitlin, but no. He just ends up in the simulation and doesn't do anything else. The same with Oliver and Diggle and Thea. I don't know these people, and I have to assume that there's a large portion of people who only watched one or two of the shows and had the same problem as I did. And they pretty much waste Ray. In fact, a few characters are pretty wasted during the crossover. Jax, at least, despite not doing much in general without Stein, gets to be part of giving Barry the message, and the transmutation bit at the end justified his presence. A few characters don't even get that much. Another problem that I have that's been present in every crossover between Arrow and the other shows since the beginning, though alleviated in the most recent one, is that they always love to make Oliver more important than everyone else. Sure, it's Barry's show on The Flash and he called everyone together, but he defers to Oliver. The Arrow episode primarily focuses on Oliver. Oliver is always made out to be better than Barry. Every time, and it's not just this crossover. And then Oliver pushes Kara aside because normalcy? I know that it's because Supergirl is OP and she can't be there for things that she would normally have solved without being nerfed, but still, send her away on her own mission. Don't just bench her for no reason. Not to mention that the episode ends itself with Barry and Oliver in a bar with Oliver learning a lesson at the end of the Legends of Tomorrow episode. I know it's the end of the crossover, but come on. This isn't your show, Ollie. The Legends tap out of their own show early because Oliver has to do something? And it's happened every time. When I was binge-watching The Flash back last summer so I could catch up for the fall, every Arrow crossover was a slog to get through because they kept doing stuff like this. A character bit that didn't make sense was Sarah being all morally superior to Barry because she has to fight not to save her sister from Damien Dark. Listen, I love Sarah. I really do. She's a great character and one of the best that's come out of Arrow and gotten to shine on Legends as the captain. But did the writers forget that every time they faced Damien Dark in the past, since the beginning of the frigging season, Sarah has nearly tried to kill him, timeline be damned? She's only usually stopped by someone else telling her not to, or by Dark just being too powerful. She doesn't resolve that arc of saving Laurel until the finale of the season, by the way, so why she's so angry at Barry is confusingly stupid. Even if you assume that she's mad that Barry could be the cause of all these aberrations they've been fighting, you just spent an entire season with Rip trying to save his wife and son, so maybe be a little more understanding. And with at least one of the main cast of each show having an arc, Supergirl doesn't. Like, she's just there to push forward Oliver's arc, but she's not dealing with anything for herself. She's just sort of there to be OP and help them win. It's not her Earth, and she doesn't have any major character moments, so she doesn't really do much of anything, apart from being part of the action. She gets that bit with Wild Dog, but other than that, really Wild Dog hated Barry more so than Kara. In what's supposed to be a 4-part crossover event, it doesn't really have anything for one of the headliners of one of their shows to do. And of course, no Flash-related crossover would be complete without our requisite "damn it, Barry" moment. Barry is willing to sacrifice himself when Savitar and Alchemy are still out there? Seriously? Not even bringing into account why Barry being given to the Dominators is a bad idea for his friends and family. But you have 2 unstoppable speedster-related bad guys out there. But no, sacrifice yourself. I'm sure Wally's got it covered. And he doesn't even talk this over with Iris or Joe or Wally or HR or anyone else except Siska. It just doesn't make sense. First things first, actually make it a 4-night crossover event where that week's Supergirl episode actually factors into things. Have the Dominators attack Central City and then have Barry show up for an assist to help Kara with something before the whole "remember that deal we made" scene during Supergirl. That would also allow us to get John or Alex or Mon-El in on the crossover as well. I know it's expensive to show John's Martian form and he gets to fight alongside Team Flash and Duet, but still. Following that, give Kara an arc. Don't just use her for brute force. Have her have to come to terms with something. Maybe Oliver pushes back against her immediately, and so her arc is trying to stop Oliver from being a dick. At least if he pushed against her from the beginning, his benching her would make sense later. 'Cause without that, it just feels like he arbitrarily decided he didn't like her, despite training with her earlier. And keep all the characters around for the entire special. Have Team Flash around to support Barry at the end, or at least be part of the whole "you and what army" quip. Not to mention Arrow's recruits, who I sort of like better than the Team Arrow members that they actually do have. I want to see more of them, but I don't actually want to watch Arrow. And don't waste the characters that they did keep around. Ray Palmer is absolutely wasted during this crossover, despite being the friggin' Atom. Oh, and speaking of wasting Ray, don't put your big milestone episode smack dab in the middle of a crossover event. You want to do your big 100th Arrow episode? Fine. Do it either the week before or the week after, because you destroyed the pacing of the special with the one right in the middle. I wouldn't even be so angry if it was a good episode, but it kinda sucks. Though, maybe it's because I don't care about Arrow or Oliver or anyone on that show. And stop it with the Oliver being awesome crap. We get it, he was your first superhero show. Now let's let Barry or Kara or Sarah be amazing ones. Oliver doesn't need to be the best all the time. Speaking of Sarah, don't make her a hypocrite. She of all people should be the one who understands Barry's predicament. Oliver's entire rationale for not losing faith in Barry is that he would do the same thing in his position. Sarah is literally in that position, and she did try to do the same thing multiple times. Make Sarah more understanding of Barry, because that's the type of character she usually is. And I know Barry is the king of self-sacrifice, and I know that the Dominators are a big threat, but I think that Savitar and Alchemy are a bigger threat than the Dominators. Of course, we don't get the stakes raised until the next episode, but still. Overall, the crossover has a really good story behind it, and there's just so much stuff that they still needed to iron out. Figuring what to do with all the characters, balancing arcs between the shows, and not making Oliver out to be better than everyone else. Professor Stein's stuff was really one of the highlights of the crossover, so I wouldn't touch it. With some of the minor fixes here and there, especially in the character department, it could have been a really awesome crossover event instead of just a really good first step towards future ones. And that was Invasion, a mostly good but a little troubled crossover event. Like I said, overall it's good, but there are bugs and quirks that make it a little less than what my ideal crossover would be. Considering that they have a lot of freedom to work the Dominator subplot in all 3 episodes, the fact that we divert for a milestone episode smack in the middle, it might be good for ratings, but it's not good from a story standpoint. It's not bad, it really isn't, and the stuff with Professor Stein and Lily is what finally pushed me over the edge into wanting to watch The Flash and Legends, and ultimately reinforced my decision on refusing to watch Arrow outside of crossovers. It might be a good show, I admit that, but I just have absolutely no interest or desire to watch it based on what I've seen of the show, which is like 4 or 5 episodes that tie into The Flash and Legends. All in all, Invasion was a decent crossover, but it could have been way better than it was. All this talk about DC, and that mention of the Reach at the beginning has me thinking. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more stuff, check out some of my other videos, and if you want to see videos a day early, you can support the channel on Patreon. Next week, I think I'm going to dedicate it to my favorite DC superhero. See you next time.